Hey guys, here today showing you how to replace the spark plugs on a 2007 Toyota Sienna. This is the second generation Sienna, the XL20 chassis, made from 2003 through 2009. This has, I believe, a 3.3 liter. They might have came out with a 3.5 liter, would have been like in 2007. So this might be a 3.5, but either way, it's the same process for this generation. This is a 2gr-fe engine. What makes this particular van challenging compared to other V6 Toyotas is that you have to take off the windshield wipers, you have to take off the cowling, you have to take all of this off. This guy has to come off so that you can reach the back of the motor. By all means, you can try and get to it without removing that stuff, but trust me, it'll be a headache. So it's best to just remove the wipers, remove the wiper motor, remove all this stuff on top, so that way you can have as much access to the back as you need to, because you do have to take the intake manifold off, the intake pipe off. You have to take off a lot of stuff in order to get to the back 3 spark plugs. Fortunately, the front 3 spark plugs are easy to do, and you don't have to remove anything hardly. But this is a very labor intensive job. I don't know what the book time is, but I know this customer went to the Toyota dealership and they were charging $800 you know, plus taxes and everything, to do the spark plugs, because it is a pretty long job. So I am giving them, you know, a pretty good deal. Obviously I'm still gonna get paid, but not nearly $800, not even close. So yeah, just keep that in mind. This, on the difficulty scale, it's not really hard, it's just more time consuming, because there's a lot of stuff to take off. So I will try to make this video as clear as I can, and I will try to tell you everything that you need. You shouldn't need anything but basic hand tools, and that's about it. And obviously new spark plugs. I went with the NGK Iridium spark plugs, and I recommend you do the same. This car has 191,000 miles on it, and it is still running perfectly fine on the stock plugs that came with it from Toyota. So there's no misfires, there's nothing. She just wanted to have it done, so here I am. So let's get right into it. The first thing you will need to do is to remove the wipers. They're just held on by 2 14mm nuts. They're right underneath these caps. These caps just pull off and it reveals a nut. Here's another one right here. You can use a flathead screwdriver to pop them off if you need to. What I do suggest, you don't have to, if you can just take a picture or memorize where the wiper arms actually sat at. Sometimes I take a piece of tape and I put it right here on the glass, so that way when I put the arms back on, I know that they're lined up correctly, because sometimes you can get the alignment wrong. You put them on too high, and then you end up, when it goes to do its full sweep, it'll, you know, go way off the window on the side. So that's up to you if you want to or not. I'm probably not going to, because these are obviously down as far as I can go, and I can see that. So I'm just going to leave them like that, and I won't even mark them, but it's up to you. But yeah, these are 2 14mm to remove. Most of them should just be able to kind of wiggle them off like so. Just set them down on the side. If your car is dirty like this one, you can also use the lines right here from the dirt. Go on ahead and screw the nuts back on, that way you don't lose them and you remember where they went. Okay, so after you've done that, next thing we need to do actually is to remove the top part of this plastic cowl. It is just held on by little clips that are inside, or hooks I should say. Most of the time if you choose, you know, I choose this side or that side, most of the time you can just come right in here and lift up on them. This particular clip over here is broke. I'll show you what it looks like. I don't know if it'll zoom in, but this is the hook that's in there. It usually sits just like this inside there, and as you push this clip down into the cowl, it'll hold it in there. So you would want to come in here with like a flathead screwdriver, a small one, and push on this tab, and it'll allow you to release it up. This one's broke, so I'm just going to start pulling up on this side. And these are not broke, but well, some of them are, you know, not in great shape. But you go on ahead and just pull this all the way up. You should be able to get it loose. After you get all the front part up, the very back parts kind of slide up underneath this rubber here. Just kind of lift up and pull towards the front of the car. And this whole thing will come out just like that. Okay, so now that we have that off, we can go on ahead and focus on getting the wiper motor assembly out. So as we're looking at this wiper assembly, you will want to release this clip that's here. There's a little push tab on the back that you can push. Just this little tab right here, just push it and slide this off. We'll also want to take this here wiring harness and disconnect it from these clips. You can just use a flathead screwdriver to go up underneath the clips, or excuse me, actually come right, if you look right up under here, there's little plastic clips. You can get a pair of pliers, or you can maybe even squeeze it with your fingers like that. You can just squeeze these little tabs and pull this one out, and then this one over here, you're actually going to need to, you can leave it attached actually for now. Just pull this one out and this one out right here. Just like so. And then right on the side over here, I don't know if you can see, let me see if we get over here. Right here, there's a rubber grommet that passes through this metal. After you just take and kind of force it through the hole, just like this, to make it loose. Then we'll go on ahead and pull the rest of the wiring harness out in a little bit here. Okay, once you've got those two clips out and you push this here rubber grommet out, we'll go on ahead and don't detach this here, because if you just pull up on it, it's probably just going to snap, and we don't want that. So it obviously is for something. There are two 10mm bolts holding this piece of metal on. There's one right here and there's one right here and straight back. We want to loosen those both up, and that'll allow us to flip this over so we can take the wiring harness off correctly. Just like so. Now we can see the underside of this, and we can take off the clips correctly. I usually, like I said, like to put the screws back where I got them from. That way I don't forget where they go. Okay, now we can take this here. Now we can take this here wiring harness, and just like the other clips, you'll just pinch these with a pair of pliers, or maybe your fingers if you're strong enough. Just pinch them and pull them out, and then we'll go on ahead and pull this wiring harness completely out of this here grommet area. We'll just pull it back into the engine bay, so that way it's clear when we go to remove this entire metal cowl here. Of this metal cowling, it should all just come out. Just be careful you don't slice it up by accident. Just like so, and you can just leave this down to the side. Okay, so the next thing we'll want to focus on is taking the actual wiper assembly out. It is held on by 4 10mm bolts. There's one here, one back here, one right here, and one over here on the side. After you loosen all those up, the whole unit will just come out as a whole. and you can just lift it out as an assembly and set it down to the side. Okay, now that we got the wiper assembly out, I'm going ahead and focus on getting this here metal cowling out. It is held on by various 10mm bolts, and you have to excuse me, my allergies have been kicking my butt. So someone mentioned before, this guy's doing drugs. No, I'm not doing drugs. I'm just dying out here. There's 10mm bolts that hold it on. These right here, they're in the back. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, looks like 8 in total. So you can go on ahead and just loosen all of these up and remove them all. And after you get those all loose, we should be able to wiggle this thing out of here. Oh, forgot to mention before we do that, there's a little, I don't know what this is right here for sure, but there's a 10mm nut that's holding this here module on, so you will need to use a deep socket, it looks like, but do remove this before we take this off. Might take a little bit of finesse to get it out. There you go. Okay, now that we got that metal cowl off and took the engine cover off, we can now see the engine and what we need to get off in order to get to the back spark plugs. You can see the intake manifold needs to come off. This big guy here, the air box, all this stuff's gonna have to come off. Any tubes or electrical connectors, as you can see, it's pretty takes a lot of work. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace the front 3 spark plugs first, just because those are the easiest to do, and I'll just knock them out. That way you guys can kind of have an idea once you get the intake manifold off of what to expect when you're working in the back. So these front 3 spark plugs right here, there's just 3 coil pack connectors that come off. You usually just push the tabs right here and pull them off. I'm going to promise you that these are probably going to break when you go to push and take them off, as this one just did. This one already broke. The other one's probably going to break as well. Honestly, there's nothing you really can do to avoid that. It's just brittle plastic. So, I mean, do your best not to break them, but I promise you they're probably going to break. So, and it's really not a big deal. You can go on out and buy new connectors if you want from Toyota. I'm not going to do that. And I know that the technicians there don't do that either. So, but once you take all the clips off, you can go on ahead and just pull the connectors off of the coil packs. It should just slide off like so. In order to get to this here middle one, you'll probably have to disconnect this connector as well, just so you have room to get to it. I would take this connector off as well. So that way you can have room. Do be careful with all these wires though, because they are extremely brittle. Now you can go on ahead and use a 10mm socket to loosen up all 3 bolts. Then go on ahead and just twist these a little bit, and then go ahead and pull them straight up out of their spots. It doesn't matter, you know, people will say, oh, they need to go back in the exact same holes they came out of. That's not true. Certain cars, yes, but this car, no. They are all the exact same coil pack. It doesn't matter if you so happen to mix them up. It's completely fine. So just pull them all out. You can set them in order if you'd like. It's entirely up to you. I will tell you now, if you notice that there's oil on some of these boots, then you need to go ahead and think about getting your valve cover gaskets replaced, because if you let oil continuously leak into these, then you'll start to get a bunch of misfires and it'll ruin these coil packs. and don't want to come out. There we go. Okay, we can go on ahead and remove the spark plugs now. It is a 5/8 socket, spark plug socket. As you can see, I tape mine, like I say in all my other videos. When you go to reinstall the new spark plugs, there's a good chance that the spark plug is going to get stuck in here because the rubber is grabbing onto it on the inside. That's why I tape them, so once I install them and I go to pull out this socket, I'll actually get my socket back and it won't stay stuck onto the spark plug. That's just a tip. You don't have to do this, but I do it all the time. You can see I have another socket here that I remove the rubber out of the inside because I hate it when that happens and it gets stuck. So yeah, that's just up to you if you want to do that or not, but go on ahead and remove the spark plugs. Alright, we got those all out now. Okay, just so, I think I'm pretty sure I told you guys in the beginning, but I am using NGK Iridium's LFR 6 AIX-11. This is a good plug. It's an Iridium plug. It will last just as long as these stock plugs that came in here. I do recommend you put some anti-seize on the threads. That way it makes it easier to come out later on. You don't have to put a whole lot. You see I just put a little bit there, and I'll just smear it like that, and that's all it's going to take. Go ahead and put the new 3 plugs in. You want to make sure that you start them by hand. Don't use the impact, don't use any wrench or ratchet or nothing. Just start them all by hand. That way you know you don't cross thread them. After you get them all started by hand, you can go ahead and tighten them down. I don't know the exact torque spec. You pretty much tighten them up till they're snug. You will feel them stop, you know, pretty much to where you can't really turn them anymore. That's when you know you need to stop. You will feel them initially stop. That's the lock washer just getting seated. You probably want to go ahead like almost another full turn, and you'll feel it stop completely. Okay, you can go on ahead and now reinstall the coil packs. Just pop them back down into place. Make sure you push them all the way down. Like so. Then go on ahead and reinstall the bolts, the 10mm bolts. And go on ahead and push all the connectors back on that you took off. Okay, now the front 3 are now done. So now we can move on to getting the back 3 spark plugs done. Okay, on to the back spark plugs now. Now I've not worked on too many of these cars. I've removed an intake manifold once on one of these, and it was pretty easy, but it was on a rear-wheel drive car, so the layout was different. My goal is to remove the least amount of things possible. If I do take something off that probably shouldn't been, or maybe someone has the service manual and you know you're gonna say, oh, you shouldn't have took that off, I'm sorry. Like I said, this is just a guide. I try to remove things as whole assemblies, that way they go back on easier. I try not to take too much stuff apart. I am going to now focus on taking this airbox out, taking this tubing out. You have to remove some of these vacuum lines so that we can gain access to the back to see, because I know there's going to be a bolt that's holding the back of the manifold tight. So when you do take off some of these vacuum hoses, please be careful, because these right here are already cracked. We will need to remove these, but you can see they're very brittle. So just take them off, be as gentle as you can be, and that way we don't have to go out and replace a bunch of vacuum hoses. But you do need to remove these 2 here, vacuum hoses. You can remove this guy right here off the front of the manifold right here. get a pair of pliers, break it loose like so. That way all of this can come off with the box. There's a connector up here for the mass airflow sensor that you need to loosen and remove. Just take it off like that. And then the box is actually held down by two 10mm bolts. There's one right here in the front. There's one right here in the back. Right behind here, there is a hose right here that you need to loosen and remove. It should just be able to pop it off like so. There's a little clamp here that will hold it on. I'm trying to remove this whole intake arm and everything together as a whole. There's this long evap hose that's right here. Just pop it out of its bracket. There's also another bracket back here that it sits in. You go ahead and remove that. And this little clip right here, just loosen this guy up and pull it straight up off of here, and you can just set this whole hose in the back. So I think that that's everything disconnected from this box here. You'll want to go on ahead and loosen up the 10mm. There's a 10mm bolt that's just right here that's attaching this arm to here. Just loosen that up. You don't have to take it all the way off, just loosen it up enough so that the clamp is loose, and then go on ahead and remove the two 10mm bolts that are holding on the airbox lid right here and right here in the back. This whole guy should just lift up, and if you wiggle this enough here, you should be able to take this whole entire thing off as an assembly. We don't have to worry about the air filter. This would be a good time to change your air filter if you need to, but we should be able to just leave that just like that in there. You can just set this box down to the side. Throttle body assembly. There's coolant lines that go to it that are right here in the bottom, and I don't want to mess with those. So what I'm going to do actually is loosen up these 10mm bolts right here and just take the throttle body off. You get these all off, throttle body should be loose, and you can just let it hang down to the side. You can just let this just sit down here to the side just like so, and that'll be fine. We will also need to move this, excuse the lighting, I guess it just got sunny all of a sudden. This hose right here that goes right into here, you need to go on ahead and loosen and remove it. You can leave the other side attached, just let this one hang down to the side. And another one we'll need to take off is this large tube here, vacuum breather hose. You'll need to, well, I guess you just pull it off like so. You can pull off this other side if you feel it's getting in your way. I'm probably going to do that just so I can have it off. And then we'll focus on getting the rest of the intake manifold off. Okay, we got most of the stuff on this side taken off. I can't zoom in on that side, but if you look right here on the side, there's also another connector that you can remove. Just like all the other ones, just squeeze the connector and pull it off. Just like so. All this here main wiring harness we should be able to leave alone, and we shouldn't really have to touch it. Now on most of these manifolds there is a bolt in the very back of them, maybe one or two, holding the back part of this to a bracket. I got to reach back there and figure out if there is one or not. Be right back with you. Okay, as I was saying, there's usually one or two bolts holding on the back of the intake manifold. They're attaching it to brackets to add as kind of like a support system. These ones are usually what give everyone problems, and rightfully so, because they're pretty hard to get to. Even if you jack up the car and try to get at them from the bottom, there's just no there's really just no room back there. There is one that's located, there's pretty much one on both sides. There's one on this side right here that actually is very easy to get to. It's right behind this here throttle body. There's a 12mm bolt that's just right here. And the absolutely most difficult one is pretty much, as you can see, I cut these here so I can reach around the back. I'll just retape these when I get done. There is one that's right pretty much directly behind this here runner, but on the back you can't see it, you have to reach for it. It is they're both 12mm bolts. This one I already have loosened up. I'll loosen it up completely. You literally have to reach around the back. So if you reach around the back, you'll feel a big giant wiring harness. Pretty much right behind that, if you feel, there's a 12mm bolt head that's you just have to feel it. Very hard to get to. You could probably try and use some combination of a ratchet and a 12mm. What I found best was actually this really short box end, just 12mm wrench. That worked fine. They're really not on very tight, so this one is loose now. Obviously you can't ratchet with this, so you have to take your time and just slowly loosen it up. But this is the bolt that's in the back. It's a 12mm, and there'll be one over here on the other side as well. I'm going to go ahead and remove that one now too. Like I said, this one is just located right behind the throttle body housing here. Both of these bolts kind of go up at this kind of an angle, so that's what makes them even more difficult to get at. They're not straight, so you know, you just have to try your best to get it off. This is probably going to be the hardest part of this whole job, is these two bolts. The only other thing that's really holding this on is obviously the bolts that are in the middle there. Those are actually Allen head, and well, there's two 10mm nuts on the outsides, and then there's Allen head bolts in the middle. There is the brake booster vacuum hose. It's the hose that's running back here to the back. You could try and loosen this up from the intake manifold in the back, but honestly it's blind, you can't see anything. So just loosen it up here where it actually goes into the brake booster. There's a clamp here that you can take off, or what I like to do is just simply grab a hold of the hose and just pull the whole thing out. You will hear hissing from vacuum getting released, just like that. But just pull the whole entire thing out like that. That way when you remove the intake manifold, this whole thing will just come out as one. So now we'll focus on getting the intake manifold bolts out. Okay, now we can focus on getting the 6 fasteners off that are holding the intake manifold on. There are two 10mm nuts on the outside. Just loosen those up. Then the center Allen head bolts are a 5mm Allen socket. Okay, once you got those all loose, you should be able to just, I might take a little bit of force, but just lift up the intake manifold all together and remove it off of the car. Now you'll see we'll have access to the back 3 spark plugs now. Okay, now we're going to work on the back of the engine to get the 3 coil packs off. It's definitely going to be hard to see them. They are there. You will need to, what I suggest is to loosen up. You'll need to remove this here 10mm, and it's going to be attached to a AC line here in the back. There's also a 10mm nut that's holding it on. Obviously somebody forgot this one because they put a zip tie right here, so I'm going to cut that, and I'll just re-zip tie that later. There's supposed to be a bracket right here, but there's not one here. You may not even need to disconnect it from the line, but you can certainly try to if you need to. For sure you'll have to loosen this 10mm and take it off. And there's also a 10 millimeter right here that's holding on the main wiring harness, and another 10 over here that's holding on the main wiring harness. I'm only suggesting taking those off because you may need to maneuver the main wiring harness around so that you can have room to get to the coil packs. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen all these up now. Oh, before I forget, I want to make sure to cover these holes so that way nothing falls in and you don't lose anything by accident. Bracket right here is attached to the back of the cylinder head with a 12 millimeter bolt. You should be able to get in here right on top with the ratchet to reach that 12 millimeter. Okay, you're just gonna have to maneuver this wiring harness around as best as you can in order to pull the coil packs out. To be able to loosen up all of the connectors right now, there's 3. You're gonna have to just do your best to get them off. It might be pretty challenging, but you can just try your best to get all the connectors off. Okay, so I got all 3 of those off. That was a bit of a task, but they are off now. Now you can just focus on loosening up the 3 10 millimeter bolts that are holding the coil packs down. You might be able to get some of them with ratchet. Actually, you should be able to get to all of them with a short 10. So we'll go ahead and get those off. Okay, that's the last one out. Okay, now you can just go ahead and get your 5/8 ratchet and, 5/8 socket and ratchet, and go on ahead and focus on just getting those spark plugs out. As you can see, really it's the back cylinder, intake manifold, everything in the back is really what causes this job to be very labor intensive. So, and there's little wiring harness and everything, little clips and everything you got to get out the way. But as you can see, we're knocking it out, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull these 3 spark plugs out now and get right back with you. Okay, you probably will not be able to, as you can tell, get the 6-inch extension and the socket in there at once. So go on ahead and just drop the spark plug socket down into the hole first, and then you should be able to stick the extension in there afterward. Just like so. You can go ahead and loosen it up. Closer when you're trying to remove this, you'll be able to pull it up enough to where you can see the top of the spark plug socket. You're actually going to have to push the spark plug socket back down into the hole. Now I have a magnet, so I'll be able to pull it back out. Okay, now that you've removed the old spark plugs and installed the new ones, you remember to use the anti-seize on them. Tighten them down. You can go on ahead and reinstall the coil packs back into position. Just maneuver them in there as best you can and tighten up all 3 of the 10 millimeter bolts that hold them down. Don't forget to install this bracket in the very back. It goes bolted on with this side facing upward like this. It's a 12 millimeter bolt. Might be a little bit difficult to get started, but just like so. You can reconnect the coil pack connectors and then slide the main wiring harness back on to where you got it off of. And don't forget to put all the connectors back where they came from. 12 millimeter or 10 millimeter nut right here. You can reconnect the fuel injectors back. Push all these straight down onto the studs like that. Catch right here that clamps onto this guy, clamps onto this wiring harness, and it goes right here. Don't forget to clamp the connector in the back. 10 millimeter bolt right here. Okay, we can go on ahead and reattach the breather hose right here that I took off. Just push it back down. Put the clamp back on. That goes out just like that, in between the stud and the fuel pressure regulator right there. So everything back there should be good. Make sure that everything is tight. We can go on ahead and reinstall the intake manifold. If there's any oil on these gaskets, go on ahead and wipe them clean now. I'm going ahead and put the, for now, put the two 10mm nuts on the outside. You can reconnect the one connector that's over here on the end. Okay, now that you got this into place, you can go on ahead and torque down the bolts that are holding on the center, the 4 Allen head and the 2 10mm nuts. Those all get torqued down to 14 foot-pounds. If you have a foot-pound torque wrench, go ahead and use that. If you have an inch-pound torque wrench, just multiply 14 by 12 and you get 168 inch-pounds. Also, when we go to install the throttle body, those will also get torqued to 14 foot-pounds or 168 inch-pounds as well. So we'll go ahead and focus on getting those tightened on correctly, and I'll get back right with you. Then you want to torque them all in a sequence. First one here, second one right here in the back, third one over here, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Now you want to focus on reinstalling the two 12mm nuts or bolts that are in the back. Remember, the ones that are hard to get to. Some people may opt to leave them off, but do not do that. Put them back where they should. I know it's going to take a little bit of time, but just have some patience and go ahead and get them on. So I'm going to put them on now. Okay, once you get those back on, don't forget to reinstall the brake booster hose. If you took it off like I did, it just pushes right back into the little rubber grommet that it came out of. Make sure that you get it seated all the way in there, otherwise your brake pedal will be very stiff. Okay, now we can go on ahead and reinstall the throttle body. It's held on by the 4 10mm bolts. Those get torqued down to 14 foot-pounds or 168 inch-pounds as well. Little bracket right here. It's important to torque these things, otherwise you might get vacuum leaks and then your engine will run like crap. Now we can go on ahead and reinstall the airbox assembly and the vacuum hoses and whatnot that needs to get attached. Make sure you slide this on first, then you can go on ahead and slide the airbox lid into the 2 notches and then push this down and tighten up the 2 10mm bolts. You can reconnect the mass airflow sensor connector, tighten up the clamp here. This little connector goes to this nipple right here. These two right here, this one goes off to this little T here like this. Just connecting all the connectors. This one goes right back here to the intake manifold, like so. This big large one goes right here onto the airbox. There's another evap line. Remember, this one here gets clipped into the back in here and goes right back on top of this purge valve. The intake manifold back here, and then right here onto the front. There's one more vacuum line, the one that was attached to the airbox goes connected right here to the front on this little nipple, just like so. It just slides straight on top of everything, like that. And if you want to go on ahead and start up the car now, you can do so. That way you can make sure that everything is running correctly and you won't have any issues or problems. I do suggest doing that before you go on ahead and put the cowl back on and put everything together, because if you run into an issue, obviously you don't want to take all the windshield wiper and all that stuff off again. So we'll go on ahead and start it up and make sure that it's running correctly. Okay, we'll go ahead and slide the metal cowl into place. It will take a little bit of maneuvering. You'll probably have to do one side and then the other first. But probably the most challenging will be get it to slide over the bolts that hold on the struts. So we'll go ahead and get that into place now. Okay, once you get it into place, just go ahead and install all the 10mm bolts that held it on. We can go ahead and fish the wiring harness back in to the side over here. Don't forget this little module over here on the side. Go ahead and reconnect that right here with the 10mm nut. Just push this guy down into here and push this guy down like that, so it'll look like that. Then you can go ahead and reinstall it back into place here. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the wiper motor. Just grab the whole unit and set it right down inside. Them by hand first, and you can tighten them. Remove these here nuts that hold on the wiper arms, then we can install the plastic shield back into place. If you remember, these will slide up under the rubber pieces on the end. There's little rubber things right here, as you can see. Slide it up under there and then push down the front clips back into where they belong. Might take a little bit of maneuvering, but you should be able to get it. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the wiper arms. As I said before, if you tape them or put tape to get the alignment right, then good on you. This car was dirty, so there's already like dirt lines where you can see the wiper stop, so that's where I'll be aligning mine. Align the passenger side first and then the driver's side. Okay, just like so. Put the little cap back on. Just pops back on. And then line up the driver's side and tighten that up as well. Go on ahead and pat yourself on the back. Probably saved yourself about $600 to $700 right there, just doing it on your own. I mean, aside from buying the spark plugs cost me $60, which is pretty cheap. And like I said, the dealer wanted $800 plus tax to do this, so saved yourself some money there if you were able to tackle this on your own. If you have any comments or questions, just ask them in the comment section below. If it's your first time on the channel, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. My channel has been slowly growing. I'm getting a little bit over 3,000 subscribers now, all thanks to you guys. I really appreciate you guys stopping by and watching the movies. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me anytime, any question. I'll do my best to answer them. And you guys have a good day.